I wonder what we're talking about today.
Zim! Yes! It is I!
Oh, wait. Sorry. You'll have to move along, hideous goblin. I'm posing dramatically for when the dib shows up.
I am Dib.
What?
I've been expecting you, dear!
Invader Zim, evil alien soldier, disguised as one of us, sent to infiltrate Earth with mechanical servants. My name is Dib Membrane.
Oh, man, Dib, not the coat.
It makes me look mysterious. Step aside! I've got a Zim to stop!
Zim reappears to launch the second phase of his plans to conquer Earth, but his longtime nemesis Dib steps up to stop him for good. Yeah, it's as long as the description is. On Google and on IMDb, the description is that short. But I'm happy to report it has 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb, full 100 on Rotten Tomatoes, and 3.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Yep, it is that good. I was a really big fan of the show. You have no idea how excited I was when they announced they were going to be doing a new movie that felt like it was actually going to try and give the show a sense of closure, because this show, as far as I can tell, only got 2 seasons, and here's how fucked up it was. The first season was 20 episodes. The second season was 7. Right after the show had ended, the show's creator, Jonan Vasquez, who already had a history in the comic industry, he decided to bring it back through a comic book. And in comparison to the original show, the comic felt like it leaned a lot more into the random humor and not so much the dark, gritty edginess that the original had. Some people may not like that, but it seems like most of its fandom welcomed it with open arms, and I really enjoy the comics. I'm kind of glad that, if anything, this is what they went with before they decided to bring it back with a movie. Also, interesting bit of note, the comics are put out by a company called Omi Press, and they are also apparently responsible for the Rick and Morty comics. Even though I stopped caring about Rick and Morty after the second season, and they're no longer doing the Invader Zim comics anymore, they did 50 of them, and as far as I can tell, they're done with it. But if they were still doing it, I would actually say that would make a pretty interesting crossover if they could actually make it work. So someone in my family got me the art book for Invader Zim because they knew that I was a big fan of the show. So yeah, if you want to know a lot of interesting history and backstory about the show itself, as well as the comic and the movie, that book does a pretty good job, and there's lots of interesting art showcased all throughout it. So being a fan of the show, as well as the comics, I was very excited to see what they were going to do with the Netflix movie, especially since in the trailer it looks like they were taking a lot of influence from the first issue of the comics. And also, being a fan of what Nickelodeon had been doing for Netflix, especially with their nostalgia-based movies. I don't want to say nostalgia bait because that makes it sound bad, but I enjoyed Rocko's Modern Life, Static Cling, and I really did like the Hey Arnold Jungle movie. So I was definitely looking forward to what they would do with an Invader Zim movie, since it felt like the show was never given a proper sense of closure. As far as I can tell, the last episode of the show was a Christmas special, and it clearly wasn't even intended to be a finale, but it just kind of was because Nickelodeon said, we're done with this show. So just like in the original show, it's the basic standard format. Zim is an alien of the Urkin race, and he was sent to Earth because his leaders, the Almighty Tallest, they hate him. They see him as their worst invader in their entire army. So they send him to some planet that they don't even know the name of, just to try and get rid of him, and they just kind of hope that he'll die off there. And of course, lo and behold, that planet is Earth, and Zim, thinking that he's the greatest invader of all time, goes down there and he's given a rust bucket little defective robot named Gur, who quickly became the fan favorite because he's just so cute and lol XD random rar lol. Now, despite the fact that Zim's costume really does not work at all. I mean, he still has green skin, but it, I guess put in a pair of fake contact lenses and a wig. Everyone on this version of Earth is fooled, except for this one Earth kid named Dib. And Dib, of course, thinks that Zim is an alien, and he's absolutely right. But everybody thinks Dib is crazy because he's all into ghost hunting and trying to find Bigfoot and the supernatural. So everybody thinks that Dib's just being crazy as usual. And so it was pretty much like this throughout the entire show. One thing I do appreciate is that the more the show went on, it felt like they actually did get to expand a little bit more and have cool science fiction elements. You got awesome space battles, you got some cool fight scenes, you got some cool world building with like technology and stuff like that. And there was a good sense of continuity, because one thing that is carried over into the comics and this movie is the whole thing about Dib owning Tak's ship. And the beginning of the movie has this prologue with everything being animated in anime style, which is fucking hilarious. The fact that Dib sees everything this way is really funny. But yeah, he imagines this like larger-than-life anime opening and pretty much describes the overall plot of the show and makes it look a lot more exciting and eventful than it probably was. I mean, there was cool space battles and stuff in the show, and there was some cool science fiction elements, but it obviously didn't look like it did in this opening animation.
Invader Zim, evil alien soldier of the Urkin Empire, sent by his diabolical masters, the almighty tallest, to infiltrate Earth and prepare it for the coming invasion. Went to my school, and with the help of his vile mechanical servants, plotted to destroy everything we have.
Fast forward a little bit to an undisclosed period of time after. We don't really know when this was congruent to the last episode. It's not really that important. All you need to know is that Zim miraculously disappeared, and Dib has been keeping a sharp eye on him. So much so that he barely leaves his room. Like, he never leaves. He's pretty much fused to his office chair, and he reeks, he's gained weight. He clearly hasn't gone outside in a very, very long time, because he's just been glued to his monitors trying to make sure that Zim is not up to anything. In other words, Dib has basically turned into a typical Reddit or Discord moderator. As it turns out, that was actually part of Zim's plan. He's been intentionally doing nothing, just waiting in his toilet. It makes sense in context, but he's just been doing nothing so that way he could throw Dib off, and he would slowly get out of shape so that he wouldn't be able to stop whatever Zim has planned next. And once Dib wheels his way out of his room and gets over to Zim's place, Zim finally reveals that this is just phase 1 of his plan and that there's a phase 2. However, being Zim, he doesn't really know what the hell phase 2 would be. He didn't think that far ahead. And if he did, he doesn't remember it.
Would you like me to record any and all mention of Phase 2?
No, thank you. Zim forgets nothing.
As Zim tries to figure out what he should do next, Dib decides to go back to his place and get into shape. And there's a huge montage of Zim trying to figure out what to do. He has Gur try to go through all the things they have that could potentially be a phase 2 of their plan. And Dib starts to get into shape. And
I was in bad shape, then I got 2 in shape, now I'm back to normal shape!
so now that Dib is basically back to normal, he heads over to Zim's place to try and stop whatever he's up to, but Zim starts to realize that he doesn't have a phase 2, and on top of that, he pretty much learns that the Tallest do not care about him. It finally starts to seep in through that thick, narcissistic skull of his that the Tallest don't care about what he does, and that he is basically a perpetual failure. And this sets Zim into a depression, and he gets drunk off of nacho cheese.
Thank you.
Hey, keep it down out here. Trying to be miserable in my cheesy cocoon of misery.
Yeah. Do you expect anything else from a show like this? All the while this is going on, they established that Dib's dad, Professor Membrane, has built this device called the Membracelet, and it's a thing that goes onto your wrist. And according to the dialogue, he says that the whole reason of its existence is to open apps and bring upon world peace. Somehow. And they're going to be unveiling this new creation at a Peace Day conference, as they say. So Dib figures that this will be the perfect opportunity for him to reveal Zim's secret to the world, because Zim in his funk just says, okay, yeah, I'll be your prisoner, Dib, I'll go with you, and reveal that I'm a space alien. And Dib thinks that he's finally won.
You really give up? I actually finally win? Earth is safe.
Guess what? Things aren't that easy. Zim was actually honeypotting Dib so that way he can get access to this Peace Day conference, and when people aren't looking, make off with Dib's dad, take over the conference.
I'm Professor Zim! Oh, so that other guy just retired and put me in charge. And I just made some exciting new changes to the bracelet.
And he basically takes credit for the Mem bracelet with special modifications that he made. And of course, everyone being as dumb as a bag of hammers in this show's universe, everyone runs over and loves it. First, Dib thinks this is a nightmare because he wakes up in a cold sweat, but it wasn't. His dad is taken somewhere very far away, and his dad has been replaced by Clembrain, a defective fishman clone that Zim made. And I like that Zim apparently recycled this plan that he was going to do at some other date, but he finally got to use it. Yeah, this fake father, I guess, was supposed to throw off Dib, but it obviously doesn't. Him and Gaz know very quickly that it's obviously not their father, because it looks, sounds, and acts nothing like him. And he also has this weird obsession with pudding.
You're not our dad!
Oh man, here we go.
Oh, that's a terrible thing to say, son.
Ib, always kidding. Of course he's our dad. Great breakfast, Dad.
Is it good pudding?
It's the worst pudding I've ever had in my life.
What's most important about Clembrain at this point in the movie is that he's supposed to keep Dib and Gaz under lockdown so that they can't get in the way of Zim's plan. Because the big part of Zim's plan here is that everyone who's wearing these Mem bracelets have to hold hands all around the world, and allegedly that's supposed to bring upon world peace. But because of those special modifications that Zim made, there's some ulterior motive at play here, obviously. So one thing they established earlier when Zim realizes that the Tallis are nowhere to be found, they're not even remotely close to Earth, and they were never planning on coming, Zim decides that he'll use this technology to transport Earth to their vicinity so that way they'll have to come to Earth. Because apparently, and I remember them saying this in the show, the Tallis Armada, like their ships, where it's them and all their like little cronies that operate the ships, they just go in a straight path. They don't make any turns, they don't make any kind of left or right, they just go straight forward. They're like sharks, gotta keep swimming.
Millions of light years away from that path is Earth. Do you see what this means, human?
Your leaders only fly in a straight line?
The Tallis aren't coming!
So Zim decides that he'll teleport the Earth from where it currently is to their destination right in the path of their ships so that they'll have to come to Earth and they can see what a great job he's done taking it over. And that's one of the many things that I liked about this movie. Even though Zim is still his same dumb self, he still has delusions of grandeur, he still thinks that he's the greatest even though he is a fuck-up, he's actually kind of a threat in this movie. Like, even very early on, there's a good creepy image during that anime fantasy sequence where they actually do manage to make him look somewhat intimidating. And even though there's not a whole lot like that throughout the movie, like he still is just his same goofy self, thinking that he's perfect, thinking that he's untouchable, even though he's still just the same old Zim. There's one moment where it actually feels like he's a legitimate monster. When Zim is talking about how his plans will come into fruition, and the last piece of technology that will help make his plan be a success is Mini Moose. And they put this like deep demonic filter on his voice, and it's actually kind of terrifying.
Only one being in the known universe has such a power. My creation.
So yes, Zim actually succeeds this time. He teleports the Earth from where it is to where it could be in close proximity of the Tallis and their Armada ships. But what Zim didn't think about is that it ends up creating what they call a Florpus hole. What exactly is a Florpus hole? Well, it's bad news. Anything that gets sucked into it, it seems like there ain't no coming back from it. It'll teleport you into some other dimension, and it seems like you're pretty much going to be fucked after that. So Dib and Gaz have to make sure that Earth doesn't get sucked into that Florpus hole, and the only person who can even remotely help them in a time like this is obviously their father. And they find out that he is being held captive at a space prison, which kind of reminds me of some of the things they did in the comics. But they go on this big expedition to try and find this space prison, and of course they're going to have to use Tak's ship, and they also have to give Clembrain the slip as well. And they trick him by saying that they need to get to the garage for some family bonding. And once they get to the ship, they piss off and they get away from Clembrain for now.
We did it, kids! Away for science!
Right. Now about that pudding. Don't wait up for us, Clembrain!
End up finding the space prison, which looks like a giant block. Kind of looks a little bit like the Borg from Star Trek meets Minecraft. They get in there, and they temporarily get locked up, and it seems like all hope is lost. And this is one of the surprising things about this movie. I felt like this when I first saw it in 2019, and I feel the same way rewatching it now. It's actually kind of surprising that this movie has a few heartfelt moments.
It's all my fault, Gaz. Why aren't you saying I told you so?
'Cause making fun of you is no fun when you're this sad. You're my brother, man. I only torment you because I know you can handle it.
Another example of this is a little bit later, because it turns out that they were locked up in the same cell with their dad, who thinks that this entire thing is just a hallucination brought on by getting bumped on the head. So Dib is trying to prove to him that all of this is really happening and that there are aliens, just like he said, but his dad, being a man of science, doesn't want to believe it. So as they try to work their way back to Earth and hopefully fix all this before Earth gets sucked into a Florpus hole, the ship, as well as like the cargo thing that Dib and Membrane are in, it ends up getting disconnected through an asteroid field. They end up spinning out, they both get separated. And as Dib and Membrane are floating throughout and losing control in the middle of space, Dib says that he wants to get them back there and save the world so that his dad will finally be proud of him, and his dad says that he'll always be proud of him.
Just hang on! You'll be proud of me!
Son, you don't have to prove anything. I'm always proud of you.
Again, it feels like this movie actually kind of earned moments like that because the entire show had nothing like that. So the fact that all this time had gone by, it felt like there was sort of a growth with the characters. It felt like they were finally having characters grow beyond just the typical status quo that they originally had, which makes the ending even funnier, but we'll get to that in a sec. I know some people weren't really fond of that, but it seems like a lot of the fandom really did appreciate that. So once Dib manages to get back to Earth, he is royally pissed because he feels like he lost both his sister and his father, and he's about ready to essentially murder Zim. So then there's a big chase to try and get Mini Moose, because Mini Moose is the thing that can set everything right and get Earth back to where it was instead of in the path of the Irken Armada ships. So there's a bit of a chase scene, but Membrane shows up, and there's a big fight scene between a bunch of the Membrane lab robots that Zim took over. And apparently he named them too.
Spencer! Give on! Maria! Lawrence!
But Membrane finally revealing that underneath his lab coat and his gloves, he actually has mechanical arms, which they established earlier in the movie because he apparently learned that it's not good to pet sharks, and he learned that at a very young age.
Why, as a child, I thought sharks were my friends. I know better now.
Az also shows up, and she tells all the people in the world to hold hands because they need to be holding hands so that they could hopefully get the reverse polarity science mumbo-jumbo and get Earth back to where it originally was. So everyone wearing the Mem bracelets holds hands again. There's this very small thing, but there's a moment where, because they're in a different part of the galaxy, and there's like these little planets that have like little micro societies on them with these like really tiny creatures on it. One of those little planets ends up getting in between the scuffle of Zim and Dib, and then you see like these little happy creatures, and then like once it gets bumped, it starts spinning around, and it's like the society within it is just like crumbling. It's interesting. The show's creator, Jonan Vasquez, once said that his ultimate passion was drawing cute-looking characters in horrifying situations. I feel like that scene in particular perfectly fits that mindset. Ultimately, it seems like they're too little too late as the Irken Armada ship with the Talus on it is about ready to collide into Earth, and they don't really care. They say that they're just going to blast lasers so that way they can just keep moving forward. But on top of that, it seems like they won't even need to because it's about to get sucked into a Florpus hole. And here we get a whole slew of different animation styles as they keep miraculously bouncing from universe to universe to universe in the Florpus hole as Membrane tries to figure out how to use Mini Moose to finally get them back to where they once were. I really liked scenes like this because it felt like it was just animators being animators, and they were just given carte blanche to do whatever they wanted. You know, they were able to go buck wild and they were just able to do whatever they wanted. There's different animation styles. There's pugs in like little costumes. There's also the anime style again. There's like chibi cutesy art style at one point. Everyone looks like they're skeletons. Everyone's puppets for a couple seconds. Just a bunch of creative stuff all throughout this sequence, and I really dug the hell out of it. But ultimately, they get Earth back to where it once was, and the Talus ship ends up getting sucked into the Florpus hole instead. And it's pretty much implied, I guess you could say. I mean, they're screaming in agony, and they're surrounded by flames, so I guess it's fair to say that the Talus ended up in hell. Puppet hell, since they're puppets in this dimension as well. What's most important is that it seems like everything is back to status quo, everything is normal again, the Membranes are having a loving family dinner, and they even kept Clembrain, because Clembrain, earlier during the big final third act fight scene, Zim told him to fight Professor Membrane, but then eventually he decided he didn't want to do that because he loves the Membrane family. And I love Dib's reaction after they see that he's still there. He's like, so is he just gonna live with us now, or what? This is what I was talking about, how things just kind of reset and all that sweet sentimentality stuff earlier. Even though it was nice to see the Membranes actually do seem to have a loving rapport, and you know, even though Gaz is a horrible little girl, and it seems like Dib's father never really took any of his alien hunting seriously. He said he was always going to be proud of him. He still doesn't believe in aliens.
Why didn't you invite your little green friend in for dinner, son?
Dad, that was Zim, the alien who almost destroyed the world, remember?
Son, of course I remember. I remember getting hit on the head and dreaming up all that crazy stuff.
What?
Oh, and Zim finally reveals what the true phase 2 of his plan was. All that stuff that happened throughout the movie, the trying to teleport Earth to where the Talus could finally see Zim's victory over taking over planet Earth. All that stuff, the Florpus hole, that wasn't phase 2 of the plan, no. It was to steal a clown puppy statue thing from the Membrane household.
What if I told you my plan all along was to steal this, whatever it is? Phase 2, it was phase 2 all along.
9 out of 10 plan, absolutely brilliant, genius. What makes it even better is the reveal of what happened to the Talus after they got sucked into the Florpus hole, because Zim is just so confident that they're gonna be proud of him for stealing that puppy clown statue thing. And then they're just screaming in agony, and Zim's like, well, I think they're proud of me. And that's basically where the movie ends.
That sounded like a yes to me.
Yay! I miss you so much!
Oh my god, yeah. As a huge fan of Invader Zim, I really did enjoy this movie. I went into it wanting to see what they would do, because the trailer made it look like it was going to be somewhat an adaptation of what happens in the comics. And while the first half of the first issue of the comics is pretty much the same as like the first 20 or so minutes of the movie, I did like that they branched off and did something new with it. It felt like that there was a lot of them trying to do something grand scale. It felt like something that even if Zim was a success, this probably would have been what they'd done in some capacity. The whole plot line, the whole moving Earth so that the tallest would be finally on the same set path, and that, you know, Zim thinks that he could finally show off his victory, even though the tallest do not give a shit about him. All this kind of stuff, it felt like something that they would have done back then. Hard to say if they would have kept the whole sentimentality and the, you know, character growth between Dib and his family. I don't know if they would have done that back then, but still, I really like those moments, and I thought it made the ending 10 times funnier that even after all that happened, Membrane still thinks that it was just a hallucination. It's like, well, things are back to normal, I suppose. I like the art style. I thought it was great. You can tell that they put a lot of work into it. Just like with the original show, I really liked the little use of stuff like color work. I thought was great. You know, the character designs I thought were good. You know, a lot of the animation on little things like the mouth movements and facial expressions I thought were great all throughout this thing. The voice acting, like everyone sounds exactly the same after all this time. Like Andy Berman, who does Dib's voice, he sounds exactly the same. It sounds like he hadn't aged. Same with Gaz and, I mean, obviously, Richard Horvitz. He is Zim. I mean, come on. Like, when you think of that man, he probably has a few more voices that people know him for. But let's face it, when you think of that man, you immediately think Invader Zim. Because even when he's not putting on a voice, he just has that cadence. He is Zim. And he did fantastic in this movie. He actually came off like a legitimate threat sometimes, while still being the lovable moron that Zim always was in the show. And I like the fact that Gurr got to be funny, but they didn't overuse Gurr.
Gonna order a million pizzas, and then I gotta roll around in them pizzas, and that's the story about how I turn into a giant pizza.
But anyway, yeah, the voice cast did a great job. The animation looks great in this movie. I thought it was really funny. I liked the scenes of sentimentality. I thought the plot was really good. It felt like a good kind of cap off to all the stuff that happened with Invader Zim. It feels more like a finale without necessarily being one. But it also doesn't feel like they're just leaving the door open for Invader Zim Season 3. It doesn't feel like that. Because honestly, I'm the kind of person who's like, you know, if a show had its run, doing a season many years after the fact, I don't know if I'm really 100% for that. One of the examples I always go to is the Boondocks. Like, the first 3 seasons of the Boondocks were really good. They were all made around the same time. They all felt like they kind of gelled together. And then the 4th season came out many years after the fact. Times had changed. And it just feels like it wasn't the same show anymore. And it's like, it's not god-awful or anything, but it's clearly not the same as the first 3 seasons. And if you're going to do this kind of thing, I like the idea of them doing it as a comic book because, I mean, Jonan Vasquez apparently has a huge history with comics. He had comic series like Squee and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. And I think Zim was like his first attempt at doing an animated pilot, you know, trying to make a kid's cartoon. So yeah, I like them doing it as a comic because it feels like Jonan Vasquez was definitely more comfortable with that, you know, that industry compared to the animation industry at the time. And then, yeah, it feels like this movie was the right kind of send-off. Like, I prefer if they do it as a movie or a special than having to force another season, because then it just feels like, oh, okay, we're just gonna pick up after all these years. Yeah, 20 years later, and we're doing a new season of this show. I mean, I like the original show, but it feels like way too late to be doing this kind of thing. Really like this movie. I highly recommend it. If you're a huge fan of Invader Zim, check it out. Just don't expect the same kind of dark grittiness, because if you're more into that, then this might be a little bit disappointing, but I still really liked it. I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of the same random humor. The characters were still great as always. But if you did like Zim for the darkness, there's no harvesting kids' organs. There's none of that kind of shit in this movie.
Look at you! You've gone too far! You're a hideous blob of stolen organs!
I've been working out.
In 2019, it feels like Nickelodeon was like, yeah, we'll make a new movie, just don't put any of that dark shit in. We don't want to get calls from parents. Because if so, then it's not even going on Netflix. We're not even going to do it there. This is Nickelodeon, and here the execs roll around naked in money while fucking watching SpongeBob or whatever the hell they still show. That does it for this video. And as for what we're doing next time on the Blockbuster show, we are going to be talking about a recent release. We're going to be talking about the big horror phenomena that people have been waiting for years. And of course, I'm referring to Five Nights at Freddy's. Because why not? In the same year we got Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and Cocaine Bear. Why not have fucking Freddy Fazbear the movie? But until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
And nobody is as excited for the big celebration as I am.
I am!
Not scientifically possible!